Imagine committing the perfect crime. Every fingerprint wiped clean, every witness silenced, every piece of evidence meticulously destroyed. You've planned for months, executed flawlessly, and vanished without a trace. The police have nothing. The forensic team finds nothing. You are untouchable. But what if I told you that the smallest, most insignificant detail you never even considered would be the very thing that brings your entire world crashing down? Today, we're diving into one of the most chilling cases in criminal history, where a killer left absolutely no evidence at the crime scene, yet one microscopic mistake led investigators straight to his door. This is the story of how science, persistence, and an almost invisible clue solved what seemed like an unsolvable murder. On a cold March morning in 1987, the body of 32-year-old Linda Mann was discovered in a quiet English village called Narborough in Leicestershire. She had been brutally attacked and murdered while walking home along a secluded footpath known locally as the Black Pad. The scene was horrific, but what made investigators' blood run cold was the complete absence of traditional evidence. No murder weapon was found, no witnesses came forward, no fingerprints were recovered. The killer had seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving behind only questions and grief. What the police did have was something relatively new to criminal investigations in the 1980s, biological evidence that would eventually revolutionize forensic science forever. They had samples of the killer's genetic material, but at that time, DNA profiling was still in its experimental stages. The technology existed, but it had never been used to solve a murder case. The investigation stalled, and the community lived in fear, wondering if the monster among them would strike again. 3 years later, their worst nightmare came true. In July 1986, 15-year-old Dawn Ashworth was found murdered in almost identical circumstances, less than a mile from where Linda Mann had been killed. The similarities were undeniable. The same brutal method, the same isolated location, the same complete lack of physical evidence linking anyone to the crime. The killer had struck again, and once more, he had left nothing behind that could identify him through conventional means. Detectives were certain they were dealing with the same perpetrator, but proving it seemed impossible. Then, a 17-year-old kitchen porter named Richard Buckland walked into their investigation. He had learning difficulties, a new Dawn Ashworth, and under intense questioning, confessed to her murder. The police believed they had their man. Case closed, or so they thought. But here's where the story takes a remarkable turn. Dr. Alec Jeffreys, a geneticist at the University of Leicester, had recently developed a revolutionary technique called DNA fingerprinting. The local police, desperate for answers and wanting to solidify their case, decided to use this cutting-edge science. They sent the biological evidence from both crime scenes, along with a sample from Richard Buckland, to Dr. Jeffreys' laboratory. What came back shocked everyone involved in the investigation. The DNA analysis confirmed that the same man had killed both Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth, but Richard Buckland was not that man. Despite his confession, the DNA evidence proved beyond any doubt that he was innocent. This was a groundbreaking moment in legal history. For the first time ever, DNA evidence had exonerated a suspect, and Richard Buckland was released. But if he wasn't the killer, then who was? The investigation was back to square one, except now they had something unprecedented, a genetic blueprint of the real murderer. The police made a bold decision. They launched what became known as the world's first DNA mass screening, requesting blood and saliva samples from every adult male in the surrounding villages between the ages of 17 and 34. Over 5,000 men voluntarily came forward to be tested and eliminated from the investigation. It was an enormous undertaking, requiring unprecedented cooperation between law enforcement and the scientific community. Month after month, samples were tested, and month after month, none matched the killer's DNA profile. The investigation seemed destined to fail again. The killer, it appeared, had either fled the area or had somehow avoided the screening. Then, 6 months into the mass testing, a woman sitting in a pub overheard a conversation that would change everything. A man named Ian Kelly was boasting to his colleagues about how he had taken the blood test for his friend Colin Pitchfork. He described how Pitchfork had convinced him to impersonate him during the screening. Claiming he had already given a sample for a friend, who was scared of needles and didn't want to go through it again. The woman immediately reported what she'd heard to the police. When investigators looked into Colin Pitchfork, they discovered a 27-year-old baker with a wife and 2 children, living an apparently normal life in the village of Newbold Verdon. On the surface, nothing about him seemed suspicious, but when police arrested him and took a genuine DNA sample, the results were undeniable. Colin Pitchfork's DNA was a perfect match to the evidence from both murder scenes. This was his one mistake, the single error that unraveled everything. In his arrogance, Pitchfork had believed he could outsmart the system by having someone else take the test for him. He had been so careful at the crime scenes, leaving no fingerprints, no witnesses, no physical trace evidence. He had thought himself untouchable. But he had never imagined that his own genetic code, invisible to the naked eye and impossible to disguise, would be his ultimate downfall. When confronted with the DNA evidence, Pitchfork confessed to both murders. He also admitted to other sexual assaults in the area. The court heard how he had specifically targeted young women in isolated areas, attacking them with brutal efficiency before disappearing back into his ordinary life. His neighbors were shocked. His family was devastated. To everyone who knew him, he had seemed like a regular, unremarkable man. But science had revealed the monster hiding in plain sight. Colin Pitchfork was convicted of both murders and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 30 years. His case became a landmark moment in criminal justice history. It was the first time DNA profiling had been used to convict a murderer, setting a precedent that would transform law enforcement forever. Today, DNA evidence is standard in criminal investigations worldwide, solving cold cases decades old and bringing justice to countless victims and their families. The technology that caught Colin Pitchfork has only become more sophisticated over the years. What took months in 1987 can now be accomplished in hours. DNA databases have expanded globally, linking crimes across borders and identifying suspects who thought they had gotten away with their actions years or even decades earlier. The science that seemed like something out of fiction when Dr. Alec Jeffreys first developed it has become one of the most powerful tools in the fight against crime. This case reminds us that in our modern world, there is no such thing as the perfect crime. No matter how careful criminals think they are, no matter how much evidence they destroy or how cleverly they plan, science has given us the ability to find the truth. Colin Pitchfork's single mistake, asking someone else to take a DNA test in his place, was the thread that investigators needed to pull to unravel his entire facade. It's a testament to human ingenuity, scientific progress, and the determination of those who refuse to let the guilty walk free. If you found this story as fascinating and chilling as I did, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into the cases that changed criminal justice forever. Drop a like if you appreciate the incredible work of forensic scientists and detectives who use every tool at their disposal to find the truth. And let me know in the comments, what other unsolved or landmark cases would you like us to explore? Your support keeps this channel going and helps us bring you more of the stories that matter. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember that justice, no matter how long it takes, will always find a way.